Hello and welcome to today's broadcast. I'm Davina. This is the Trump verdict. He guilty on all 34 counts. Thank you to the jury. Let's try again. Hello, thank you and welcome to today's broadcast. We are talking about the Trump verdict. Guilty on all 34 counts. Welcome to the studio. Let's see if it's going to go live now. Ready to go live? We are live. Okay, great. Thanks. Welcome. Talking about Trump's guilty verdict, guilty on all 34 counts. The charges of falsely falsifying 34 business records with the intent of committing or concealing a secondary crime. And the jury of violating a federal election campaign finance law or a New York City law of not concealing information from voters in an election. But definitely they had to be unanimous on the crime of falsifying business records. So I'm just so excited right now. It really seems as if there's a lot of disinformation in the public arena around the economy. Most Americans who've been polled and surveyed don't know that the unemployment has been below 4% for the longest stretch of time since the 1950s. They might say their own finances are good, but they feel convinced that other people's finances are bad. It is true that the price of goods and services has been on the rise for a while. Obviously, the price of goods and services dipped during COVID when people weren't purchasing goods and services. So yes, definitely a very market increase since that pandemic fall off of prices. And given Putin's war of aggression against the neighboring country of Ukraine, there's been additional blockages in supply chains since COVID, but they've eased and demand eased a little bit. Prices began to fall in some areas. I heard that Target and Walmart have lowered some of their prices lately. The great thing is people can make space to give Joe Biden credit for his achievements, President Biden credit for his achievements, and bring into sharp focus the nature of Trump's character as a con artist, as a confidence trickster, as someone who used the show The Apprentice as a platform to hoodwink many, many Americans. There was even a piece today in Slate from a former producer from The Apprentice who talked about how they used artifice to represent Trump as having a nice office with nice furniture. They put those things in there. They wrote lines on cue cards for him to say, and he himself brought to the table an enduring form of racism, not only in his own decisions, but what he thought the American public would feel. He projected his own racism and ruled out awarding the first season winner title to a Black contestant on that show because he thought America wouldn't be ready to see an N-word win. He was projecting his feeling of America can't cope with a successful Black winner. And of course, you can see how it stuck in his craw when President Barack Obama won in 2008 and again in 2012 as well. And here we are on this historic day, the first time a former president of the United States has been found guilty of a crime. It's happened in other countries, not banana republics, but countries with functioning legal systems where no person is above the law. And here we have it today. Bless that jury and protect them, protect their anonymity from rabidly angry Trump supporters who will find it very difficult to engage with reality, given the way in which they've been very thoroughly spoon-fed a twisted version of reality in which Donald Trump is the most persecuted man on the world. Mother Teresa, he said yesterday, couldn't beat these charges. He was beginning to sense that the evidence against him was quite overwhelming and the jury might reach a guilty verdict, which they have. So thanks for joining in with me. Feel free to chime in with some comments if that's what you would like. And we're going to view Twitter right now just to see some updates from this platform, which look, Elon Musk tries to wreck as hard as he can because he's in the tank for Donald Trump. There was even some reporting yesterday in the Wall Street Journal to say that Trump's been floating the idea of giving Elon Musk an appointment in a future administration. Of course, Elon Musk is trying to use his $44 billion purchase of Twitter as a potent social media platform where a lot of preeminent influencers and thinkers share political information, share information about the crimes that occurred during the Trump administration, Trump's corruption, the crimes that he was impeached over and crimes he wasn't impeached over. But as of today, he's a convicted felon. And Mark Joseph Stern, who is a senior writer for Slate, notes that as a convicted felon, Donald Trump is now prohibited from voting in his home state of Florida. So the idea is Democrats mostly already accepted the fact that Donald Trump is a crook of long-standing duration who's previously paid millions of dollars in fines for violating anti-money laundering provisions, who just after he won the election in 2016, paid $25 million in a settlement for his Trump University being a scam. All right, let's see if there's anything else here that we want to show. Yep, he's guilty. People are tweeting there is a God, which I think is probably representative of a lot of people feeling a great deal of relief and even pride in the United States legal system, because that is very special that they were able to give the jury those instructions that if you go outside and the ground is wet and you see people folding up umbrellas, you're allowed to conclude that it's been raining. So even though Trump is very careful not to have an email address, and he was unaware that his lawyer was, Michael Cohen at the time, was recording him in some conversations about the plot to pay off his the women who accused him of, either in Karen McDougal's case, being in a year-long adulterous relationship with him, or in Stormy Daniels' case of a sexual encounter at a golf tournament that Donald Trump tried to extend through promises of Stormy Daniels being able to appear on The Apprentice. But he'd also used physical intimidation by standing between her and the door on the day of that sexual encounter with her in a way that she says she didn't feel she was raped or even coerced, but she felt that she'd let herself down by doing something she didn't want to do. So yes, it is historic. They are reporting it. That's a little people turning on their television and taking screenshots of this momentous occasion. I'm so glad to be able to be broadcasting. I turned off a movie I was watching with my children and they understood how much this means to me. I've been broadcasting since 2018. I live in America now, but I started off broadcasting from Australia, which is where I'm from. I'm the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, and I found a familiarity in Trump's rhetoric of, oh, sweetheart, could you just turn the oven off? Just press off on the oven for me. Thank you so much. And so I won't be able to stay long. I'm going to have to take that chicken out of the oven. It can just get a little crispier for the moment, but this is just such a exciting and happy occasion. I'm going to make that screenshot bigger. Let's see what other cool things people have to say. But yes, I was saying I am the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. My grandmother was able to survive when her parents encouraged her to jump from a train that was taking them to a death camp. And she always stressed to me how reluctant she was to leave her parents behind, and how and she would try and encourage me to achieve in an educational sense, because, and this was her reasoning to me, she would say, the Nazis tried to take my life, but they couldn't take my knowledge. And it made no sense to me as a small child, or even a middle-sized child. Did not get it. It took me till I was perhaps 40 years old. And I was like, oh, when you achieve something educationally, it contributes to your self-worth. So regardless of how badly people treat you, if you've already made that effort and extended yourself and learned things and acquired knowledge, you can keep that. You can keep that and use that to reassure yourself and bolster yourself even in the most trying of times, because it's a true achievement that cannot be taken from you. Even if other people vilify you, degrade you, and and persecute you in the sense of murdering your family members and trying to murder you as well. Did not make sense to me as a young girl, but I'm glad I got there in the end. Thanks, Nana. Look on the screen, there's that famous gif from The Office of a character called Ellen celebrating, not Erin celebrating. What is she celebrating? I don't remember. I do really like The Office, but anyway. More celebrating gifs. Okay. Now, why is Teflon Don trending? Because he hasn't. Oh, they're saying something has finally stuck to Teflon Don. It is funny, though, because people, things have stuck to him before. He was, Donald Trump and his father, Fred Trump, were asked to make restitution for their racist behavior in marking rental applications of Black Americans with a C for colored, having their staff do that so that they wouldn't make it through the application process, regardless of their personal financial standing or any references or anything. They wouldn't be allowed to rent a property in a Trump building because of their racism. So they were asked to make restitution to advertise in foreign minority-owned newspapers, and Donald Trump and his father at that stage of their lives in 1973 advertised in a Russian-owned newspaper to Russian immigrants in New York City instead, which was not an adequate restitution for their behavior, their racist behavior against specifically Black Americans. And there should have been more significant consequences then. That would have helped us avoid some of the calamitous consequences of an initial Trump presidency. Need I say more? Trump deliberately botching the pandemic response effort in order to frame blue state governors as having high death totals by refusing to assist with federal aid and advancing testing procedures and taking action to help slow down and contain that pandemic at an earlier stage. They were very happy to coast on the idea of it being a blue state problem mismanaged by blue state governors. And even when Jared Kushner and his friends were on a national testing strategy commission where they were brainstorming ideas, they abandoned their efforts to produce a national testing strategy. It was a whistleblower talked about it to Vanity Fair. They decided that it would be more politically logical to let the pandemic pass without significant federal intervention. And then Trump also tried to use the pandemic to enhance a divided reality in which some people would accept Donald Trump's dismissals of the significance of the pandemic, and they would feel, oh, he's right, it's not a big deal. That was somebody's dance. Okay, I'm just going through some more headlines. What was I saying? Testing. Oh yeah, the famous example of Trump's mismanagement is that he wanted to be such a hero that even when the severity of the pandemic across all states, red and blue, was becoming more apparent, he pulled back with some of his efforts to dismiss it as a hoax and instead said that maybe there were simple solutions. For example, he had just heard an update that disinfectants could kill viral particles, COVID-19 viral particles. So he was saying perhaps there's a way of injecting it into the body. Literally disinfectant, which will kill you if you inject it into your body, because we aren't just ourselves Petri dishes for cultivating COVID-19 viral particles. We are biomes with microflora and our own good bacteria as well as bad viruses and bad bacteria. You can't just put in disinfectants into our bodies or kill our cells as well as killing viral particles. So that was some very blatant self-aggrandizement from Trump's part, evidence of his bloated ego. And I don't want to just focus on that because it wasn't just his ego. There was a Machiavellian type of conniving in letting COVID rage in order to denigrate the efforts of blue state governors to contain it without federal assistance, and to then, when it was beyond blue states, when it was taking hold of red and purple states, to then say that he wasn't going to help blue state governors because they weren't sufficiently polite to him, to withhold deliveries of protective gear, etc., and more tests, and say that more testing wasn't necessary because more testing only revealed more COVID cases. I'm still really hung up on that, because that's something called democide, which is like a form of genocide, but it's just when you cause mass death through government inaction and negligence. And Trump was the leader of the government and the instigator of efforts to be negligent and actively malfeasant in relation to distributing supplies fairly across the United States as needed. So I'm going back to my smile. I'm tuning out of some of my outrage that Trump was a key factor in the unnecessary death and devastation caused to so many American families. People lost relatives. Children lost relatives, and to a lesser degree, their own lives as well. And it has an impact. It's not just, oh, we survived it, so let's memory hole that. People love memory holing things. There are people, Fox News pundits, who've been insisting, oh, you have to just compare yourself to where you were 4 years ago. 4 years ago in 2020, people were suffering. There was panic. There was not calm, competent leadership from the White House. There was Trump telling journalist Bob Woodward, oh, yes, it's more serious than people think. Yes, it's more serious than the flu. It's transmitted in the air. I don't want to start a panic. I.e., his eye was on the stock market, and he didn't want prices of stocks to fall. He wanted to be able to continue taking credit for an elevated stock market. I mean, the irony is now the stock market's very high, and very few Americans know about it because the media is being very quiet about the good news during Biden's tenure as president. And it feels to be a form of pandering to Republican narratives that may spring from a desire to perpetuate Republican-initiated tax breaks for billionaires, specifically billionaire media mogul owners, because a lot of America's media are wealthy people, extremely wealthy people, who benefit from subsidies and tax breaks. And it doesn't matter to them if the economy as a whole suffers, as long as they get the quid pro quo advantages from their relationships or their pandering to Republican political narratives, which do not bear a strong resemblance to reality. They are a distorted reality that serves Republicans. Teflon Don is dead. Long live the United States of America and the great state of New York. Meaning Trump's reputation as being someone who never gets a criminal conviction, regardless of how many crimes he committed. Ta-da. All right. Teflon Don has about 34 new scratches. Running with a pan analogy there. Teflon being a substance used to coat non-stick pans. All right, let's see. Who's saying lock him up? The judge gets to determine the sentence for Donald Trump. Donald Trump will inevitably appeal his sentence. He's not going to be having to turn up to jail any day soon. He'll be able to post bond. I mean, the man owes a lot of people a lot of money. He owes the state of New York, what, $464 million? He owes E. Jean Carroll, what, $85 million? He owes a lot of money to a lot of people, but he can still rustle up money for bond. All right. My gosh, Hillary Clinton should have been president. James Comey helped botch her campaign trajectory at a critical moment by caving to people pressuring him from within the NYPD and their friend Rudy Giuliani to pretend that there were additional emails found on Anthony Weiner's laptop, because Anthony Weiner's wife, Huma Abedin, they evidently shared the laptop, like I share a laptop with my son. But the emails had already been gone through from Hillary Clinton's private server, and James Comey had asked staff members within the FBI to go through Anthony Weiner's laptop and find if there was any new material on it. They deliberately dragged their feet. The New York branch of the FBI, together with pressure from NYPD, in the New York area, just a sort of conservatism in part of the uniform wearing and the FBI in New York to say, nope, we're going to go to the media and say that you are withholding information about the laptop, that we don't know what's on the laptop, that it's probably more things, that it's probably classified information, and that Hillary Clinton's guilty of a crime. He reopened the investigation, even though they'd already concluded that there were no classified emails. There were some that contained a little C in the body of the email, but those were misapplied. There wasn't any significant classified information relayed in those emails. They were predominantly grandchildren, baby photos, recipes for, was it creme caramel or creme brulee? Creme brulee, I think. And yes, she should have won, and Russia definitely helped divert the public's attention from the Access Hollywood tape, in which Donald Trump's own voice exposed him as a predatory, adulterous, disloyal husband, person of bad character, who said, beautiful women, can't help myself, just have to kiss them. It's like a magnet. You can, when you're famous, you can do anything. They'll let you do it. Oh, the crowds are cheering, lock him up. Well, we've got to listen to that. Oh, maybe that's just an old crowd, because that's just New Hampshire. But still, I will listen to that, even though it's not pertinent. Oh, I do hear that, lock him up. So that was New Hampshire. That's exciting. I mean, there is a strong element of people, even Republican voters, who understand that the man is a criminal, a crook, who throws the interests of the people of America under the bus whenever it conveniences him, whenever it's to his convenience, whenever it's in his interest, whether it be in a pandemic, whether it be starting ill-advised trade wars with American trading partners, just in order to further his own narrative that he himself is a strong man who's willing to take on China. He's not willing to take on China. He'll do whatever it takes to curry favor with them when he wants a different news story. So in 2019, when he wanted there to be a news story of a new agreement with China, he kissed butt. He kissed up to President Xi and said he's wonderful and he's managing this new disease wonderfully and that there's nothing to worry about. And that was because there was a recession in the manufacturing sector in the United States that was spreading to the transport sectors and the storage sectors that were arising as a consequence of his manufacturing tariffs, or tariffs against goods made in China, which he did to be like, see, look at me, I've got all the answers, I'm such a strong man, and had already caused significant financial harm to American farmers, who had then had to be placated with $28 billion of public money in assistance that wasn't distributed evenly either. It was distributed in a way that disproportionately benefited wealthy farmers, and smaller farmers just had to still deal with those losses themselves that they'd incurred from China's retaliatory tariffs in response to Trump's bad judgment initiation of tariffs against China. All right. Well, I better go. Trump has a frowned expression on his face as a verdict reading is completed. He is not moving. Okay, that's news. Well, look, people have some nice art. Well, we'll close with that nice art. There is that gentleman. He is wearing an orange jumpsuit in this picture so that we can just imagine how nice that would be. The thing is, we can't just dwell on those type of fantasies. We still have to do the work of registering people to vote, overcoming various Republican efforts to deter people from voting or confuse people so they no longer think that there's a meaningful distinction between parties. You can see Trump supporters on the internet saying things like uniparty, and they're just trying to discourage people from voting for Democrats, really. But hopefully it discourages Republican voters from getting out and voting for Trump, because even with the man as a convicted felon, there is still an intensity of pro-Trump sentiment amongst people who look for easy answers with regards to problems America faces. First of all, they exaggerate the current economic problems that are being experienced. Wages are up, employment levels are high, the stock market is high, and the pace of inflation has slowed. So relative to wages, goods are gradually becoming more affordable over time. And with Democrats, if they're able to have a majority in the House and the Senate without being dependent on Republican-leaning Democratic Senator Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, who's dropped out of the race, they'll be able to do things like reinstitute the child tax credit, which massively reduced poverty in the United States, massively reduced the number of children in America who went hungry during the day, massively reduced the number of families who couldn't keep food on the table and their utility bills paid at the same time. So those payments were introduced during the part of the COVID era when Democrats had more power. They lost control of the House in 2022. If it comes back, there will be so much more good that can be done for the American people. And I want to say thank you to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, President Biden, Vice President Harris, for the policies they've pushed through to benefit the American people, and shake my fist at those who distribute and disseminate disinformation and pretend that everything's terrible when it's not. I mean, it's not easy to generalize about other people's experiences. My family's okay. I know lots of families still do struggle with the elevated cost of goods and services since the pandemic began to dwindle, since Russia invaded Ukraine, since all of the things that have happened to put upward pressure on prices, and since some corporations took advantage of those known inflationary pressures to raise prices of their own accord, not because they had to, but in the knowledge that they had a plausible deniability for their own pursuit of profit at the expense of the American public. So prices in many instances have been raised just because the demand was there. People post-COVID were like, I've survived and I'm going to buy things. I'm going to live in the moment. I'm going to enjoy life. Upward demand on prices that were met by corporations maximizing their profits, using that cover of, well, we know that now that there's a resurgence of public activity, now that we are no longer in lockdown, and now that there's still some pressure on supply chains, and we can use that as a cover story to raise prices and pretend we had to. So yeah, that's all from me for today. Thank you for sharing this moment with me. I'm a little sorry there hasn't been any commentators, but I'm still grateful for those who are watching. Hope you enjoyed this show. If you have any suggestions, if you think I talk too quickly, I welcome feedback. And yeah, I just really enjoyed being online for this moment, knowing there are other people who are experiencing joy and satisfaction and a sense of justice. The relief that the American judicial system was able to produce a just result in this case, that the jury had the bravery, despite all of the constant stream of threatening language from Trump's social media posts on Truth Social and his surrogates like Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, and the other politicians who went down to New York, took time out of their putative jobs, voting on bills and legislation in Congress, came to New York to disparage the legal system in New York, to disparage the judge, to call it a sham, to undermine the trust of their listeners, people who listen to them in good faith and put their trust in their Republican leaders to say, oh, I bet they must be speaking the truth, and to just sell them a bill of lies about how this was going to work. And now all of their negative comments about the judge are going to compound in terms of those MAGA true believers. They're going to feel a lot of hostility towards those jury members. So I'm not a believer necessarily in the power of prayer to do anything other than make the person who's doing the praying feel more good and hopeful and positive. But sometimes collective wishes can help create goodwill towards certain outcomes. So if we all do put our hopes and good wishes for the safety of all of those jury members who sat on this case, who had the courage to evaluate that evidence carefully, fairly, and thoroughly, and say, yes, the pavement is wet, it was raining. Pecker spoke to Cohen and Trump in the same meeting. Pecker testified to that. He has a non-prosecution agreement that he can't be prosecuted for the crimes he committed in furtherance of this goal of protecting Trump, enhancing his electoral prospects, and helping him get elected by adding more confirmatory details to the effect of Trump's own voice on the Access Hollywood tapes, saying that he grabs women. We've got E. Jean Carroll, who said he grabbed her. He grabbed her in a dressing room of a fancy department store that I always forget the name of. But E. Jean Carroll remembered, she consulted her friends. They said, one of them said, yeah, go to the police. The other one said, he's too famous and powerful and rich. You're not going to get anywhere in the judicial system. And she listened to that friend for decades until eventually she had the courage and the support from people around her to say, okay, George Conway was someone who advised her and said, I can hook you up with Roberta Kaplan, a very good lawyer. And that gave her the ability to push through and to get a just result within the civil system, to have a finding that Trump was liable for sexually assaulting her in a dressing room without her consent. And that then he had to pay her first $5 million and then $85 million, an additional $80 to total $85 million, for defaming her, for calling her crazy, for saying he'd never even met her, when he himself misidentified her in a photo as his second wife, Marla Maples, and said, that's Marla. He did think she was attractive at that time when he assaulted her. He did do whatever he wanted because he thought he could, because he was famous. Today is the day that his own belief has come short. The idea that he can grab whoever he wants, that he can intimidate Stormy Daniels and have a sexual relationship, and then pay her money to be silent so that the voters don't get that corroborative detail of his disloyal, adulterous, sexually menacing nature. That he thinks he can do anything, cheat on any wife, and that people will still vote for him. Not just shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and have still people and not lose a single vote, that he could cheat on any wife, that he could have as much adulterous sexual activity he wanted, he would never face a consequence. That he could falsify business records in furtherance of a scheme to conceal the payments and who they were from the American public, so they wouldn't know that he was the one who paid for Stormy Daniels' silence, that his lawyer had to take out a second mortgage to make that payment and hide that it was actually Trump's need to have Stormy Daniels acquiesce to a non-disclosure agreement, that it was Trump's need to win the 2016 election that pushed forward that scheme, that quid pro quo, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back, with David Pecker, the head of AMI, where they would not only push out very negative stories claiming Hillary Clinton was close to death, stricken with pneumonia, could barely breathe, all of these negative, mostly fabricated stories or exaggerated stories about Hillary Clinton, but also was simultaneously paying women who had evidently slept with Donald Trump whilst his third wife, Melania Trump, had just given birth to their son, Barron Trump. Karen McDougal had a sexual relationship with Donald Trump for a year. And today in the Slate article about what it was like producing The Apprentice, let's find it, Slate, Trump, and we'll type the word finally. The Donald Trump I saw on The Apprentice, published 21 hours ago. We'll share it on the screen. That'll be exciting. Hello. Says, there we go. 4 years. Oh, scroll down. Thank you. Okay, cookies, blah, blah. For years, I couldn't say what I watched the former president do on the set of the show that changed everything. Now I can. May the 30th, 2024, by Bill Pruitt. What's today? 30th. So published this morning, I guess. Oh, yeah, at 5:35 a.m. The Apprentice was an instant success in other ways. It elevated Donald J. Trump from sleazy New York tabloid hustler to respectable household name. In the show, he appeared to demonstrate impeccable business instincts and unparalleled wealth, even though his businesses had barely survived multiple bankruptcies and faced yet another when he was cast. So Donald Trump was in the middle of going through a bankruptcy when he was cast. Wow. By carefully misleading viewers about Trump, his wealth, his stature, his character, and his intent, the competition reality show set about an American fraud that would balloon beyond its creator's wildest imaginations. I should know, I was one of 4 producers involved in the first 2 seasons. During that time, I signed an expansive non-disclosure agreement that promised a fine of $5 million and even jail time if I were to ever divulge what actually happened. It expired this year. Oh, so that's why Bill Pruitt can speak up. All right, so there's some details about magicians but they say confidence was important. Our show became a 21st century version of a pig in a poke scam. It's a long con played out over a decade of watching Trump dominate primetime by shouting orders, appearing to lead, and confidently firing some of the most capable people on television, all before awarding one. Does he mean most capable people or incapable people? Anyway, all before awarding one eligible person a job. Audiences responded to Trump's arrogance, his perceived abilities and prescience, but mostly his confidence. The centerpiece to any confidence game is precisely that, confidence. As I walked into my interview for The Apprentice, I inadvertently learned how important it is for every one of us involved to demonstrate confidence above all else. So the Jay Bienstock, the showrunner, there's no mistaking who's in charge. He seems to like what he hears and offers to follow up with my agent, but I have to check your references before I can hire you, he says. You'd be crazy not to, I reply. Meaning, you'd be crazy not to check my references, but Jay claps his hands together and grins. That's what I'm talking about. That's the confidence this show needs, because he thought Bill Pruitt was implying you'd be crazy not to hire me. There you go. They thought they're originally going to have a new and different billionaire every season. They'd reached out to Spielberg, Katzenberg, and Geffen, amongst others, but Trump is the only one who agreed to sign on. Yes, Trump understood that his talent for making money lay with manipulating public perception. Oh, I really better go or the chicken is going to be burnt. All right. Goodbye. Celebrate. Happy Trump is guilty on all 34 counts day. That's historic. May the 30th, 2024. Go read that Slate article if you haven't. Yes, it goes further into saying that Trump used the N-word to describe a hardworking, successful candidate who had excelled during the course of the show. And he did so projecting his racism onto the American public. And the tragedy of the last few years is that Trump has been more right than many people would have expected. A lot of liberal people were like, just, trust the American public. They're not, racism is a thing of the past. We mostly have non-racist people now. People were able to vote for Barack Obama. And it's like, yes, but the election of a black president triggered enough people to spend more time watching Fox News. Rupert Murdoch, the owner of Fox News, was able to weaponize those racist fermenting sentiments that some people were aggravated by the success of a black man achieving the highest office in the land, that made them willing to suspend their evidence evaluation faculties. They were able to buy the biggest nonsense about what then President Obama was proposing. They were able to believe and advocate and even protest that there was going to be something called the Affordable Care Act. They said it was going to be socialism and death panels. They believed nonsense, and Trump took advantage of it during the era as well, that they would believe anything, that Barack Obama was not born in the United States, that he somehow would have been able to make it through all the processes to become president without having an American birth certificate. Trump leaned into he exploited the worst elements of the American character in general. He exploited the worst people believing the worst things and made them worse people. He rode that wave to greater national prominence in a political sense, and then he rode that wave further to surprise a lot of people with his victory in 2016 that was helped by illegitimate campaign finance law violating foreign help from Vladimir Putin and his gang of KGB agents using the internet to fabricate support for Trump, to aggravate Bernie Sanders supporters, to convince them that they definitely shouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton, that Bernie Sanders had been robbed of his rightful win, to ignore the millions more votes that Hillary Clinton got in the Democratic primary, and to try and just deter Black people from voting, gun owners to definitely turn out to support Trump, and religious people to believe that they could be heroes in saving the lives of innocent babies if they voted for Trump. And of course, making abortion illegal just puts women's lives in greater danger. It is unlikely to reduce the number of abortions, and in any case, forcing people to have children they don't want, forcing them to continue pregnancies that they don't want, coerced pregnancy continuations, involves a lot of suffering, not just for people who are pushed into poverty, pushed into remaining in domestically abusive relationships, pushed into a whole bunch of things by the removal of legal options to terminate a pregnancy, but women whose lives are then put in jeopardy because they can't access stabilizing medical care when they are having a miscarriage. They're framed as murderers because it's not easy to demonstrate what instigated a miscarriage. Is it just a spontaneous miscarriage, or did you do something, lady? You're now a criminal suspect, because Republicans have succeeded in persuading enough people who just want something to care about, that they should care about forcing girls, forcing victims of rape, forcing victims of incest, forcing victims of domestic violence, forcing people who are impoverished to proceed with a pregnancy that they would rather not, to confer imaginary full human status on unborn babies who still inhabit a human body when that process can endanger the life of a woman. A woman who receives chemotherapy treatment and who receives a cancer diagnosis and is told she cannot legally receive chemotherapy treatment because that would cause her fetus to spontaneously abort. And she's like, yeah, well, I'd like an abortion because I could have another baby, but if I die right now, this fetus is going to die, I'm going to die, or I'm more likely to die, and my pre-existing children will be left motherless. Like, I would like to maximize my chances to live, please. Do not take that choice away from me. Another woman without any children already, or who's prepared to say goodbye to those children, she could make that choice to take that gamble and say, I'm not going to have any chemotherapy treatment for my cancer. But Republicans are creating a legal landscape or they already have created a legal landscape in many states where it is now very difficult to obtain stabilizing medical care or medical treatment for conditions whilst a woman is pregnant or whilst a girl is pregnant. And 10-year-olds have had to travel out of state. And that's the cases where the families have been willing to step up and say, this is atrocious. Think of the families that have suffered in silence, who've just gone, okay, my 12-year-old, my 10-year-old, my 11-year-old, my 13-year-old, they just have to give birth, and we just have to cope with that because we've been deemed unworthy of making those choices for ourselves as a family. That 13-year-old girl can't be trusted to make the choice for herself, but she is trusted with giving birth to a child when her body is not really at a stage where that will be easy. Oh, coming, darling. Okay. Bye. Justice for women and access to reproductive health care treatments. Modern medical treatments should be available for women. Men who commit crimes should face the full weight of the law, even if they're a former president. Take care of each other.